Ric Flair, traveling around and hanging out with you. And by the way, I just wanted to tell you, when I become president, which is going to be really on its way as of tomorrow night, when you guys elect me, winning the primary in South Carolina, I just wanted to tell you, I wanted to go ahead and get you sort of tuned in to the next Secretary of Homeland Security, Ric Flair. Actually, what we're going to do tomorrow, we're going to all the polling places. Everybody that votes for us, we get our thanks. Those who don't, Rick's going to take you down. I want to say thanks to all of you for coming out. I know it's late. It's been a long day for us. We started after getting to Hilton Head area about 1:30 in the morning, and then starting early there, going to Greenville, to Spartanburg, to York County, and then back here, and all those places in between. But it's been the most exhilarating day. And I'll tell you why. Because the people of South Carolina are sensing the opportunity to do something historic tomorrow. And what we've seen is a momentum that has been building over the past several days and come to a crescendo peak today. Except tomorrow, we're going to simply take it completely beyond everything. And tomorrow night, I'll stand on the stage. I'll only have one speech in my pocket, and that's a victory speech, because we sense something special happening tomorrow. And I like you guys too. Thank you. Over these past few weeks, we've had a wonderful time in South Carolina getting to know people, and you've been incredible. The hospitality here, the welcome, the reception. You've asked tough questions, but you ought to. I'm asking to be the President of the United States. You have a right to understand something about who I am, what I stand for, and what I would do if I were president. In many ways, I'm like a lot of people in America tonight. I'm a guy over 50 looking for a job. I just hope I get the hire. But the fact is, there are a lot of folks for whom it's not been real pleasant. 142,000 people in South Carolina have actually lost their jobs. Today it was announced that the unemployment rate in this state has gone up to 6.6%, the highest jump in a single month since 1990. Interestingly, a few months ago, people were laughing at me on the stage in Dearborn, Michigan, when at one of the Republican debates, all of the Republican candidates were asked, "How's the economy doing?" And one by one, every one of them had said, "Oh, it's doing great," until they got to me. And when they asked me, "How's the economy doing?" I said, "Well, if you're standing on this stage, it's probably doing pretty well. If you're the guy in the corner office in the large company, it's probably doing great. But if you're the guy serving the food, if you're the one driving the truck, if you're the one who's handling the bags," and quite frankly, if you ask those folks, they tell you it's not doing so good. Because many of the people in this country, the people who work very hard and literally are living from one paycheck to the next, and are one missed paycheck away from not being able to pay the rent, not being able to take care of their kid if he falls at the playground and breaks his arm, not being able to put gas in the truck because this year it's 80 cents a gallon higher than it was a year ago. For people who are struggling in the middle class, there are a lot of folks for whom the economy has been a challenge because they know they're working harder this year than they were last year. And they're not sure that they're getting ahead or ever will. And that ought to change. And one of the reasons that it's like that is because we have government policies that, instead of working to help facilitate the free enterprise system and facilitate economic development and job creation, has actually complicated it. Even though 80% of all the jobs in America come from small business, ask most small business people what their greatest challenge is, their greatest competitor, and they'll tell you their toughest competitor is not the guy across town or across the country or even across the ocean. Their toughest competitor is their own government, whose taxation, regulation, and litigation makes it incredibly challenging for them to be able to succeed. It ought not to be that hard to take the American dream and make it work. And that's what has to change in this country, where the government starts working policies that empower you rather than empower the people in Washington. And that's what's wrong. People get to Washington and they forget what it's like to live in the real world, because they don't. And you have to decide tomorrow, do you want to send somebody to Washington who's already there, who's a part of it? You have to ask, if they're a person who's been there a long time and they haven't fixed it yet, why do we think they'd suddenly come up with a way to fix it now? I've got a better idea. give somebody a chance who's been struggling with those issues in a state like South Carolina. For 10.5 years in Arkansas, looking at a road system that needed to be rebuilt, looking at schools that were not giving our kids an adequate education, looking at a tax system that really penalized people who were trying to raise their kids, penalized seniors for getting to that point where their paid-off home saw their property taxes keep going up. So we started cutting those taxes and indexing the income tax for inflation, cut capital gains tax, eliminated the marriage penalty. We doubled the child tax care credit. And then we started recognizing that there were ways that we needed to improve our state by rehabilitating our highway system, which we did. And then the challenge of taking over a state where the Supreme Court had been tying up our schools in court for 3 governors, and finally deciding enough was enough. Let's make our education system work. And so we did. And our schools went from some of the worst in the country, where we used to just be proud we weren't dead last, to this week being named the 8th best education system in the country. I think that's the good direction that America needs to go. Part of what we did was say that we'll pay teachers more, but we'll expect more. And we unleashed weapons of mass instruction, ensuring that not only was the left side of the brain being developed with math and science programs, but insisting and ensuring that every student had an education in music and art, because that's where the creative and the right side of the brain gets stimulated. There's something wrong when 6,000 kids in America drop out of school every day, and it's not because they're dumb, it's because they're bored. That ought to have to change. We got people in Washington that have been there long enough. If they could have fixed the immigration issue, they would have, but they didn't. I promise you, within 18 months, we'll have a true border. And it's not because we don't want people to come to America. It's just that when they do come, we want them to come through the front door and do it legally. We thank God every day that people are trying to break in our country, not break out of our country, because it's a good country, and I'd want to come here too if I lived anywhere else. But the way people come ought to be through the law. And they shouldn't jump ahead of those who have been patiently waiting to take their turn. And when people come here on a visa, it's the government's responsibility to make sure that they don't extend the stay. Every one of the 19 hijackers on September 11th, every last one of them, had been given a permit by our own government. It was stamped and they were allowed to come in. But 63 pieces of fake ID later, and those hijackers had done the unthinkable. And they did it having been allowed to come, because half the illegals in this country didn't slip through the border undetected. They came right through and got their card stamped, but nobody ever checked on them once they got here when their visa expired. And you know the government's response, what Washington says about that? Well, we just don't know how to deal with it. Look, a lot of you in this room tonight, you've ordered stuff from Amazon.com. I do it all the time. And guess what? Once you make that order, you can track what you ordered from the time it leaves the warehouse to get on the plane, to get to the distribution center, to get on the truck, right to your front door. You can, in fact, track that book, $10 worth of a book, from the time it leaves the warehouse until it tracks your door within 50 feet of where it is. So it occurred to me, if our government, with all of its resources, says that it can't keep up with all those people, well, then let's just outsource it to FedEx and UPS, because obviously they know how to get that job done. And I know many of you are students here, and some of you are wondering, when you get out of college in 7 or 8 years, when you get out of school, will you have a job or just a huge debt hanging over your head? And quite frankly, we need to make sure that this country is alive with economic opportunity and jobs, so that you don't have a diploma, no job, but an amazing banknote to pay off that'll take the rest of your life to do it. It ought to be that getting out of college means that you have a chance for the kind of job that gives you economic opportunity, prosperity, and security. But it doesn't happen when we have trade agreements that aren't enforced but on one side of the deal. When we have trading partners in our free trade that don't play fair, it's not free anymore. I believe in free trade, but I believe in fair trade, where both parties play by the same rules and we don't keep losing jobs, people overseas, because I'll tell you something, this country has got to be able to feed itself. It's got to be able to fuel itself with its own energy resources. And it's got to be able to fight for itself and have the manufacturing jobs so that if we have to, we can build our own airplanes, tanks, and the weapons of defense. Otherwise, it's not just jobs we've outsourced. We've outsourced our freedom. And ladies and gentlemen, that's unacceptable. That should never happen to the United States of America.